thinking about not the what's going to happen.
building.
Exactly. And to go one step further, we can't fix everything, but each of us has a burden for different things because of our experience in life. And I think we just need to be responsible when the Lord moves on us, that this need connects with what I am and what capacity I have, that I act on that. The other thing is that if, I'm just gonna make something up, but let's say that you say, Lord, I wanna help in this capacity. And you've got something that's variable in your life, say maybe overtime. And you say, Lord, I'm gonna commit my overtime to this project. I'm just gonna say that and leave it with you. And particularly if you don't like doing overtime, let's say, now all of a sudden there's purpose. You're not thinking about the negative impact to you, you're thinking about each minute, each hour I spend in this capacity is actually taking care of a need, a real need for a real person somewhere in this world that's gonna put hopefully them one step closer to recognizing Jesus or being a part of the family of God.
Your comment reminded me of a story of a person who was a member of this church not that long ago, Elaine Swanberg. And while I was pastor here, I remember a story that I will never forget that happened to her. And I'm thinking it was related to investment, actually, but it doesn't really matter what the cause was. But I think it was investment, and she thought, well, I don't do any of these things that you hear the stories about with investment. And so just in her heart, she didn't tell, I don't think she told anybody, she certainly didn't tell me, the pastor, but in her heart she decided that she would give for investment any unexpected money that she received during the next year. And she prayed about it, and she just kind of let it work. Sandy maybe knows this story better than I do.
Well, I just want to add that was in the time when there wasn't a lot of extra money. The economy was not good. It was in the early 70s. And basically her bosses had told her there will be no bonuses. And she was...
Well, told the whole staff, I think.
Yeah. And that there would not be any bonuses because of just the way the economy was.
And so what happened? No, you tell the story.
Well, so she said that she would give any extra that she got.
Knowing though that probably she wasn't going to get anything from work.
Exactly. Yes, and God does have a sense of humor. Because now I can't remember, but it was like a crazy amount.
I think it was about $1,000
Oh,
first.
no, it was more than that.
Well, first she got a bonus.
Yeah.
There were several things she got.
It was more like $10,000. I mean, it was crazy.
That's great.
And it just...
Well, and then she got a raise. They told employees that there were going to be no raises that year. But they came kind of quietly to her and said, we appreciate what you're doing for our company and you're so valuable. We're going to give you a raise of so much per hour. Well, she promised all of this to the Lord. And so we had a very healthy investment fund that year. But it was incredible what God did for her. And she was committing something that, as far as she knew from a human perspective, she wasn't going to get anything. But she couldn't think of anything else. And
well, it said in the Bible that it pour out blessings that you can't even.
I know, it was almost so. And these monthly raises that she got were, indefinitely until she quit work, I suppose. And so that's all committed to the Lord. And what a nice thing to come to church and have a bunch of money and you're trying to figure out where to give it. Where am I going to give this money to? Because I have this extra. It was a beautiful story. Lauren?
We think God has a pie, and it's our job to slice it up into so many slices, and that's it. God just makes another pie. I mean, it's no big deal. He just makes another pie.
It really is true that when we don't have enough faith to believe that God is going to provide for our personal needs, it's really doubting God's ability to provide for us.
speaking to Don's point, I remember when we were doing this church add-on, but up in that corner up there, Kurt Ramsey, he didn't get overtime. And he said, you know, I'm committed to get all my overtime. He said, never had so much overtime in my life. He said, I'm tired. You know, so I think once in a while he says, try me, and see if it works.
We're starting to tell stories here, and I have to tell you another story, because it happened while I was pastor here. It was actually people at Woodland Church, and I can tell you their names. It was Kurt and Glenda Nosler. And one weeknight, I had gone out, and I was going to visit somebody. I don't even remember who I was going to go visit. But sometimes pastors learn that if you call, and of course that's actually more polite, to call and say you're coming, but if you do, people will, especially some people, will never run out of excuses why you can't come. So eventually you decide, well, I want to visit these people, I'm just going to show up. So I went to this house and just showed up, and they weren't there. And it was in the evening, and so I was driving on my way home, right down this road here, and as I was driving, I thought, oh, Kurt and Glenda live right here. It was down closer to Woodland, and so I thought, well, I'll drive in there. So I drove in their driveway, knocked on the door. Glenda opened the door, and she said, what, did God send you? And I said, well, I guess so. I don't know. I was just driving home and drove by your driveway and thought I'd stop. She said, well, you get in here. I want to show you something. And she had all their bills out on the table, on the kitchen table there, and her checkbook, and she was paying the bills. And she said, I just want to show you, we don't have enough money to pay tithe. And so, you know, there I am. And she's offering. So I was taking a look, and she showed me all the bills. She totaled them up, and she didn't have enough money to pay all of the bills, let alone pay tithe. She said, "See, now what do you expect me to do? You know, you can't expect me to pay tithe. Well, you want me to let the electricity be turned off or something?" She was a real verbal kind of person, and spoke very plainly. She didn't worry about hurting anybody's feelings, and she wasn't hurting mine, but she just, you know, spitting it out. And I said, well, Glenda, you know, I just kind of, but I said, I can't explain this to you. All I know is what the Bible promises. It promises that if we're faithful with our tithe, God will provide a blessing so big we can't receive it. And I had prayer before she could respond. Pastors do that sometimes. They don't want to talk anymore, so they say, oh, let's pray. And so then you pray, and then you can stand up and leave. And so that's what I did. And the next Sabbath at church, it was like between Sabbath school and church, and I was up in front, and I saw Glenda come in, the doors at the back. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And she got a hold of a offering plate, and she put something in an offering plate, and she left. She didn't stay for church. And what I discovered is she brought her tithe. And she, later, when I talked to her, she said, well, I was afraid I'd changed my mind, and so I just brought it, put it in the offering so that I knew I couldn't get it back, and because you just gave me a load of guilt, she said. That's what she said. And so I thought, well, that's not very good motivation for paying the tithe. But later, she told me this story. It was unbelievable. That same week, the Pathfinder Club brought 2 huge boxes of groceries. And I swear to you, I didn't tell the Pathfinder Club to do that. But, the leaders of the Pathfinder Club kind of knew them and kind of knew that they could probably use the help. So these groceries showed up on their doorstep. Kurt went to work, and they gave him a bonus, and they gave him about $1.50, as I remember, $1.50 increase per hour wage. All in the same week that they brought their tithe. So when she told me, I said, well, Glenda, did you learn something? She says, yeah. I learned that God means what he says. I said, well, surprise, surprise. Anyway, it was just a remarkable thing how God, in such tangible ways and so quickly, responded to their faithfulness and to their need, both. Yes?
Which is why I love that as a discussion question on Friday's lesson. And it says, so let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or out of necessity, but God loves a cheerful giver. But mostly I love this part. The Greek word translated as cheerful appears only once in the New Testament, and it's the word we get the English word hilarious. Which is what, and see, we're all giggling about that, but that whole idea of giddiness over, okay, I did the thing that he said that he asked me to do, and then it is so ridiculous what happens after that. And then I started thinking of all the stories in the Bible that there was joy, and it was because they were getting something they never expected. Like Lazarus, he never expected to get life back. And the joy that came out of that was new life. And the lepers, and him being thankful and coming back and saying thank you, which is not really considered a big deal or a big gift. But the joy that came out of that was healing. And just all of those stories that just started to line up, that they were intangible gifts, even that were greater, which was treasure, which was wow, and hilarious.
I had marked that too because I studied a little Greek, but I didn't know that cheerful could also be translated hilarious. And I thought a lot about it because hilarious means to me sort of frivolous, or like what happens at a party. But then I thought, well, hilarious, that means it's just like it's like cheerful on steroids or something.
Yeah.
Belly laugh.
Yeah. And and it's just like God. He wants to give us abundantly, more than we can ask or think. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's look. I did want us to think a little bit about Monday's lesson, which wasn't really to do with money itself, but it does have to do with gift, the gift that God gives us. Ephesians 2:8, probably most of you know that text by memory too, but if somebody has it, you could read it to us.
For by grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourself. It is the gift of God.
Now that's a very foundational text for understanding salvation. We cannot earn salvation. It's a gift. And as soon as you try to earn it, it ruins it. It's not a gift. It's kind of like taking a bouquet of flowers home to your wife and to tell her you love her, and as you hand them to her, say, oh, wait just a minute, I'll go get my wallet and pay for these. It ruins the gift. It is no longer a gift. And so when we try to pay for the gift of salvation, it really ruins the gift. And so when you think of all the gifts that God gives us, and we're thinking a lot about material things and health and time and all those kinds of things, but the most precious gift of all, more than any of those other things, is the gift of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. And it's a free gift. We cannot pay for it. And if we try to pay for it, we are really being offensive. Just like if you tried to pay for a gift that somebody gave you. And that idea of what is the definition of grace? That's the very first sentence under the question there on Monday's lesson. Well, grace is not an easy term to define, but one of the most common definitions is undeserved favor. I don't deserve it. I didn't do anything, or if I even tried, I couldn't. But God gives it to me anyway. Another way you can remember the definition of grace is think of the letters. God's riches at Christ's expense. That's a G-R-A-C-E. God's riches at Christ's expense. It kind of helps you remember the definition of grace by that little, what do you call that?
An acronym?
Acronym, yes. Good thing we have smart people in this class. And then I underlined that even angels are amazed at this ultimate gift. In fact, I think in the Spirit of Prophecy it talks about the whole universe is watching, has been watching what happens on this little tiny speck planet of Earth and cannot believe that Jesus would come here and give his life for us. And then secondly, must not understand why there's so few people who respond to that.
So I was going to bring out is the response part, and that's our responsibility in the gift part. You know, if you bring those flowers to your wife and she tries to pay for them, it's insulting.
Ruins the gift,
Yeah,
totally.
but if she also looks at them and goes, there's only a dozen, there's not, and she throws them in the trash, or they're not my favorite color, or she goes, then that ruins it just as much, yeah. And so.
Oh, I didn't want roses, I wanted lilies.
Yeah, exactly. What a letdown. I don't want these. Yeah, and I guess that's for me, one of the big reasons I get gifts is the response. And I think about the response as I'm getting the gift, and oh man, she's going to love these. You know, maybe I'll get a kiss out of the deal, or throw her arms around me and says thank you, or you know. And I think that's the Lord too. He has this eagerness of, oh, they're going to love this. They're going to love this. They're going to. They trampled on it, and I think that's our responsibility in it. It's just the gratitude and thankfulness.
Good point.
Which isn't much of a. It's not much of a responsibility, but I think it's just as important. Yeah.
Sometimes we're not cognizant though of the gifts that we get.
Yes. Don't
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They fall flat because, you know, we're not even tuned in.
Well, and especially the gifts that God provides.
Exactly.
We
Yeah,
take
yeah,
them
yeah.
so for granted. You know, the everyday things that, or more or less everyday things that we take for granted and we forget to thank God for. Sandy?
I was just thinking of one particular thing, our water issues here at the church, they've just been the bane of our existence for so long. And, you know, we were concerned because there was a bad taste to it here recently, and so we had a test done to see what's the composition in the water that's making it taste like this. And, I mean, there are other things involved, but we get the test results back, and it's really not bad, you know? I mean, it's really a good thing, and nothing is wrong with it. It's starting to taste better, and I just, you know, get ready to file it away, and it's all of a sudden, it's like, Sandra, we've been praying about this, and look what God did.
Mhm.
And I was just gonna throw it away, you know, not really recognize.
And we do that with dozens and more than dozens of things all the time. Don?
I think that really ties in with what Joe was saying, you know, Lauren, there, that the children of Israel, their shoes didn't wear out. And, you know, it'd be easy to say, but I wanted new shoes.
Yeah.
Right? But we often miss the longevity component of his grace towards us. The other thing about grace is that unmerited component really struck me as I looked at this lesson, because it's really easy to invest in sure things, but grace, if we look at the grace that God extended to our world, it would be giving knowing that we're not gonna get a return, but we're still showing the love of Jesus as we make these investments in reaching out and trying to do mission in the world. But if everything we do fails, we're probably not pushing hard enough. I mean, everything we do is successful. We should be doing things that sometimes people don't respond, but at least they've been exposed to the love of Jesus through that.
We're running out of time here. I wanted to look at the quotation at the bottom of Tuesday's lesson. It's from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 3. And I wanted you to notice that in this quotation, there's no indication of amount of a gift. But it says, entire devotion and benevolence prompted by grateful love will impart to the smallest offering the willing sacrifice, a divine fragrance, making the gift of priceless value.
How about the widow's mite?
Perfect example. Her gift was priceless. And your gift, my gift, if it's given with devotion and benevolence and grateful love, is a priceless gift. All of us can give a priceless gift. That's exciting for me to think about. That God will consider that gift priceless. And then one other thing I wanted to challenge you with, and this was the discussion question, which I don't think we had time really to discuss, although we haven't heard the last battle yet. It says, think about someone in your own church family right now who is in some kind of need. What could you do, even right now, that could reach out and help minister to this person or person? And what I would challenge you to do is, if you think of that person, also challenge yourself to think of a way of helping them anonymously so they don't know who helped them. One way to be sure that the gift you're giving isn't with the wrong motive is if you do it anonymously. So there's no way that you're going to get somebody's going to give you credit for doing it. And it will be fun anyway, because it's fun to do things anonymously.
I think you're gonna get credit, you're just putting it upstairs.
I mean, credit now.
But let's recognize that those gifts, it doesn't have to be a monetary
Oh,
gift.
absolutely.
And that's what I think we really need to be in tune to is, where are hurting hearts?
I have numerous times gotten notes from members of my church or church members that were there when I preached or whatever, and almost everybody after you preach come out the door and shake your hand and say, oh, we appreciate your sermon, Pastor. It's kind of like saying hello. But when somebody compliments you in a way that's unusual and out of the ordinary, you really pay attention to it, and you know that it really meant something to them, or they wouldn't have done it in that way. And so sometimes when I'll get these anonymous notes, now sometimes you get anonymous notes that are critiques as well, and then that takes a certain Christian experience to deal with that. But
You don't have to publish those.
no. But when you get a note from someone, even if it's anonymous, that's appreciating you, it is a huge compliment. And I wrote here, how do you discover people who have true needs? They don't often want people to know, and they will not ask. Sometimes the people who deserve our help the most are the most reluctant to let anyone know that they have a need. And I don't know if you have any suggestions of ways that you find that out. Maybe we could run the risk of helping somebody who didn't need it that much. But anyway, that's a little thing that isn't always easy. to know who needs. And like I tell Mania, well, I'd much rather help somebody who doesn't need it and go ahead and help them than to not help somebody who does need it because I'm not sure. And so, but I don't know how you figure that out, but I think that it would be an interesting thing and a valuable thing for us to think about. How to discover people here in our own congregation who might be in need, and then try to help supply that need. Any other last comments before we close? Elder Littlefield.
The other day, I went to a banquet and I chatted with a 70-year-old Roman Catholic priest. And during our conversation, he said, we Catholics have the biggest program in the world of outreach and helping people. But we know the Seventh-day Adventist Church is #1 among the Protestants. That's a direct quote from them.
Well, we can be appropriately proud, I was going to say, but proud is something. We can be pleased that our church does have a reputation of being very generous. I think we're particularly generous overseas. I think the amount of money, especially here in North America, that we give to help internationally is, I think per capita, is unprecedented. But we shouldn't be satisfied because if you've done any travel, the needs never end. There's always more needs. Well, folks, thank you for participating and for thinking about this lesson. Let's have a prayer. Father in heaven, it's amazing to us that you've trusted us to be your stewards. And you've been so generous with us, giving us so many blessings, time, talent, and means. And we pray that you'll help us to be filled with the desire to take care of those gifts carefully and to share those gifts generously with people who are in need. Help us to find ways of discovering what those needs are and then be willing to fulfill those needs. Thank you for your word and for what we've learned this morning as we've studied your word. And bless us now as we conclude our lesson study, and bless us during the time of the worship service, we pray in Jesus' name.